Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Road to GT Academy. This is on setting up a car. So, as you know, I'm not the best tuner at this game, or best person to help set up a car, but I'll talk you through the basics of how I go about, like when I get a car in the game, what I do to give myself the best opportunity to get the best time. So I'm going to buy a 370Z. From the dealership. So this is just to show you this is a new car. This is what I'll do if I'm joining a race and it's like you have to use this car for this race, tuning's allowed, etc. Then I would do this. Obviously I prefer to race without tuning. I prefer all car standard. If I could disable the RC sort of where you can change your brake balance and stuff, I'd do that as well, just so everyone was utterly equal, because I think that's just the best way to race. If everyone is perfectly equal, then you get the closest racing. But like the fast guys have to really push to get ahead, but the slower guys can also keep up because the cars are so sort of like together. So as you saw, this is a new car. The first thing I do is change the oil. As you'll see in a second, just changing the oil on a new car will increase its horsepower, depending on the car, depending on the increase as well. So we're going to go into the oil change settings, and you'll see that it goes from 321 to 337. So well worth it. So we'll just let that oil change. So that initially, even if that was buying a car to run in a stock race, I would do that anyway, because it just boosts the horsepower. As well, just to let you know, the engines do need running in. I think it's about 200 kilometers, 200 miles, and then it will literally run in and get the peak horsepower. So I'm just going to build the car now. I'm going to make it look a bit like a GT racer from this. So I'll just put all these Downforce extras on. Try and make it look more GT-ish than a road car. So that rear wing will help show you as well what I do with Downforce. So I'm going to go over to the car now, and initially you'll see that we have 337 brake horsepower and 472 performance points, and 0 miles done on the car. So the first thing I do is, as you can see on the right, there's a graph with 2 lines, but I also look at the current performance first, as you'll see now, and from that you can actually gauge where you need to change gear. Now, depending on how you tune a car and limit the power in some cases, depends on where you change gear in the car. So on this you can see the maximum torque is at 5,200 revs and the maximum power is at 7,200. So to me, you want to change gear where you would then hit the maximum torque. Looking at this graph, well, looking at the stats. So if you look at the graph, you can see there's a peak point there where it hits the maximum torque. It's where the orange line goes across. Now it doesn't go down that much, but it can hit very quickly sort of the increase of the maximum power. So I would change gear there to get the maximum out of the car. That's how I see these graphs anyway. That's what I've always done, and it seems to work. That's how I've always viewed them. I know when you power limit a car, if you get more power at the lower end of the rev scale rather than the higher end, so you change gear at different places. So I found that to be useful. So now with the current Gran Turismo, in the past Downforce used to play a big part. You used to just max it, but in this case you do now have to judge it on the track. So Monza you would run low downforce, and then Monaco you would run high downforce, for example. So on an average track you just put that in the middle-ish, somewhere around there. Weight balance, I do use this on occasions. I'll just show you that the weight can differ depending on how much and stuff like that, but I usually like the car to be lighter at the front and a bit heavier at the rear, mainly for when you brake and then you start trail braking, the weight's then pushed forwards and it makes the rear go a bit lighter. That's how I believe the physics works anyways. I could just be completely wrong there, but it seems to work for me when I do tune a car. But that's only when I have to add weight. I usually don't add add weight to improve performance. Sorry about that. So sometimes you have to limit the power just to get the performance points right. So I'll just buy the Sports ECU first, but limiting power can be good just to get a car just into a boundary. But then you've also got to then go back to the performance charts just to make sure you know when to change gear and things like that. So as you can see, this lowers the performance points, but it lowers the horsepower as well. 177, wow, big drop. And yeah, Gran Turismo has all these little sort of yellow question marks, which are quite useful as well. So I'm just going to go through and buy some more of all the stuffs. As you know, as I've said, I'm making a racer, so I'm just going to buy everything I can. Now transmission, I don't do much with this other than change the final transmission, the maximum speed, but you can do individual gearing. I know a lot of the better people who tune cars do go into this and sort of delve into it. Neat little tip, when you lower the power limiter and you've got a lower engine, you get more power at the lower end of the rev scale. If you increase your maximum speed to, well, a lot further on, you can actually get more speed out of the car. It's just a neat little trick that for you. I've used that in the past where a Z06 had to be limited quite a lot on the engine. It was like 70%, and then I raised the maximum speed to 220 odd. Now it would never get anywhere near there, but because I'm always in the lower end of the rev range where its maximum horsepower is, I eventually get more speed out of the car. That's just a neat little trick that for you. And I can show you there that the final gear also has an effect on maximum speed and things like that. So that's transmission. As I said, I only change maximum speed there really. I don't really go into individual gearing, but it can be useful for specific corners. You know, you're having to change gear at a certain point. It can be quite horrible. So next we're going to go into suspension. Suspension's the main thing I do. If I'm changing anything on a car, it's the first thing I'll do. So we'll just go down to, well, we'll just get all these options first. The thing with suspension is, if you think about a car, or think about a standard road car and what they, sort of the hot hatches do. They always lower it and stiffen it, should I say. And that just means it's got there's less body roll, so the weight transfer is less, and lower means a lower centre of gravity, so it turns better and things like that, and the weight distribution's not moving as much. So that's the first thing I do, is lower it. Now you will get to a point where you may get understeer and oversteer. That's when sort of the different ride heights affect it. So if you have a pointier car, so the nose is lower down than the rear, that'll help with sort of getting the car into a corner, but that will also create oversteer, and then vice versa. If the car is higher at the front and lower at the rear, that will create understeer. Now, as I mentioned with the spring rate, the stiffer it is, well, with the spring in general, the less weight movement there is in the car, but like the more weight that moves, obviously the more the car rolls, and that's more for the dampers as well and the anti-roll bars, because they do, as they say, the anti-roll bars stop rolling in the car. So obviously if you think about your standard road car, it will have quite a bit of roll and it'll be a softer suspension, but that's just for comfiness. But as you're racing, you're not going for comfiness, you're going for peak performance, so a stiffer car can help with that. It also does mean though, if it's a very bumpy track, I'm thinking a bit like Monaco, a street circuit, you'll see F1 teams, for example, soften the suspension and things like that, because the suspension's like, it's hitting the road so hard it can create drastic movements in the car, and if it's drastic it'll create unpredictable movements, and then obviously that can cause cars to spin out and stuff, so they create a softer suspension for that. And it's just, most tracks are pretty smooth, which is why you have very very hard suspensions, but or suspension settings. But obviously the bumpier tracks, you might want to look at a softer suspension. Now if I'm really struggling with understeer, I'll start to look at camber angle especially, because that can really help get a lot more turning in the car, but that really does affect tyre wear as well, so that's more of a beware thing. And then if the car is really oversteery, I'll look at that rear toe angle. 0.2 usually means will create more oversteer, and you can really knock that off sometimes to reduce the amount of oversteer you get. So yeah, camber angle, think of that as trying to get rid of understeer, and then you can get rid of oversteer that way. You can always reset it to default as well. Finally is the brake balance. Now the key trick with this is the brake balance just doesn't affect the brakes. Now the best thing to think of with this is Formula 1 again, with KERS and how they have to keep adjusting the brake balance in the car, to front to rear, depending on the corner, and the fact that whatever they change it to actually helps the car turn better. So I've noticed actually quite a lot, especially in some of the time trials I've been doing, where it can be allowed, that if you change the brake balance on the front, for example, if you make it a lot less, it will create better turning, because obviously there's less pressure to do a job with the front end of the car. Likewise with the rear, if you brake more with the rear, it's obviously going to lock the wheels quicker and then create a bit more oversteer. Now as a person driving, I prefer oversteer to understeer, and as most people will do as well. So I usually go for this brake balance of sort of a 3-7. But when there's no ABS on, you have to knock that 7 to 1 really, because your wheels will instantly lock and it'll spin you out. So they're the two settings I usually use, 7 and 3 and 3 and 1. There's a bit of explanation there again with the yellow question mark, but that's what I use for the most part. And as I said, depending on ABS, it depends what you want to do with that. And you can change that even with tuning prohibited, you can change that in the RC menu. So make sure you set that up for yourselves. And then finally is tyres. Obviously the racing tyres are the best, but I prefer the comfort ones because it creates a lot more skill in driving, having to judge braking distances and sort of judge how much grip you actually have rather than know how much grip you have. So I'm just going to add a few little bits now, because some of these you can't buy in the settings menu, and we'll just give it the best best options we can for this car, because it's just a little GT car that I'm making. That's basically it for the settings really. You know, the main things I do are suspension, transmission, just the maximum speed, just to make sure I'm getting the best out of the car, and downforce, and then obviously the brake balance. But with the transmission and the sort of the where I change gear, looking at the graph, is how I maximise the car's performance. So that's basically it for the setting up a car. As you can see, that's the GT car. I think it looks alright. It looks a bit weird, but you know, I'll use that for something at some point. The next video is going to be quite a unique one. I'm not going to spoil it. There'll be the videos that because we're gonna do driver analysis, but in real life. So I'll upload the real life footage at the weekend, and then you can have a look at that, and then we'll analyse it on Monday and stuff. And it's pretty cool, I think. But yeah, that's that for this video. So basically, all I do is change setup. So I harden suspension and use camber angle to get rid of understeer. Change the brake balance, change the downforce, change the transmission, only ever so slightly, and then make sure I'm changing gear in the right way. And you can try that changing gear thing, changing it in different areas, just to see with maximum speeds on straights. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video.